Against a dark background. Phyna. Location: Valley 333. 7th Circle of Gehenna. The Crypt. There were 3 realms, the kingdoms of the Crypt. Each reflected an aspect of the Lady Huhsz. The mother, Arcadia. The maiden, Sheol. And the crone, Gehenna. Sheol, the maiden, was open to both the living and the dead. To any born with the phylactery organ, a distributed collection of 5 glands found within the brainstem, to enter Sheol was as easy as shutting one's eyes and focusing on the place. When they opened them, they would be greeted with Sheol's beauty. Rolling green fields seeded with beautiful plants, towering cliffs with cities hewn from its stone, roaring rivers cascading into miles-long waterfalls, all sorts of exotic animals soaring and prowling and roaming in the landscape, all long extinct from the real. To call the crypt a simulation would be to oversimplify. Though, as the Huhsz who governed the crypt had always taught, the Data Corpus was technological in nature. The machine powering its reality housed in the heart of the star god Taurus, known as the Fearsome Engine. Yet it was far beyond any VR sim that could be crafted by humans. It was a kingdom of the soul, connected and in constant communication with the physical body. To be able to access the crypt was to have full access to the duality of body and soul, swapping between direct awareness of either at will. The crypt was also said to be a deeply spiritual place, each mind within its network another soul to share its experience. Psychosonic waves permeated the system, which meant that no headset or implant was needed to access the crypt. If you had a phylactery, you were connected. Sheol was a beautiful, bountiful, burgeoning world, said to be made in the image of Golta before the Dark War, and the subsequent desolation of thousands of other wars and conflicts. Although some of the natural features remained on Golta today, most were either flooded with radiation, or so exclusive that only the hyper-rich could enter, or soon to be nuked or destroyed in the next conflict. Sheol was a reminder of what was. It was youth, like the maiden. Crypt time was a lot slower than the flow of time in the real. This meant that information accessing and calculation was often done in the crypt in lieu of the illegal machine minds. Say in the real you wanted to know a fact about a famous person. All you needed was to allow your crypt self to go to a library and read up on all that information and report it back to your physical self. This would take a matter of seconds in real time. If someone with a natural phylactery, or an implanted synthetic one, were to die, they would awaken in their crypt body within Sheol, making it a very real afterlife. They could be visited by friends and family, the crypt becoming their new home. But as soon as that death happened, a clock would start counting down. You had to work to increase your time. Work often took the form of beaming into machines in the real and piloting them. You could work in factories, drive cars, operate people's home electronics, be a personal assistant or a combat unit in some conflict. There were also jobs in the crypt, farming the land for food, running messages, being part of cognition circles, which are a collective of people who have to solve problems for those in the real. Every job you did increased the delay before you had to leave Sheol on the Golden Path. The end of the Golden Path was the kingdom of the mother Arcadia. While Sheol was like an idealized version of reality, Arcadia was a true heaven, where souls could merge with no boundaries and be part of a singular supreme intelligence. This was one of the main goals of the Huhsz. the combination of all souls in Arcadia. But the golden path leads through the testing place first, where minds must learn and truly be aligned to the ways of Huhsz to join in the Arcadian light, through that which they may in Sheol work to avoid being sent to, the kingdom of the crone, Gehenna. In Valley 333, in the seventh circle of Gehenna, deep in the bowels of the crypt, there was an old-fashioned mill with a tall external overshot wheel, powered by blood. It was part of the punishment of some of the souls in that place that each day they would be profusely bled for as long as they could without falling unconscious. There were many such thousands of unfortunates to be bled during each session, and they were duly dragged screaming from their nearby pens by grotesquely formed, irresistibly powerful demons, and strapped to canted iron tables with drains at their foot. These iron tables were arranged in a series rank on the banks of the steep valley. The blood released from them ran glutinously down pipes and runnels to the stream bed, where it collected, flowed downhill, and ran with increasing vigour and force as more and more sufferers paid tribute to the stream, down to a deep, wide pool, where some sufferers had been crucified on great crosses made of their own bones extracted from their bodies. Still alive, the pain of this warped form was never ending, as their limp sacks of flesh remained, nailed to the bone crosses. They would drown in blood again and again with every session, yet never dying, aware of every sensation. From this header pool, the broad channel directed it to the summit of the mill's wheel. The wheel was constructed of many, many ancient bones, long bleached white by the action of acid or alkaline rains that fell every few days, causing such torment to the people upstream in the pens and to those on the crosses. The wheel turned on bearings made of cartilage, and laced with the nerves of yet more of those condemned, whose bodies had been woven into the fabric of the building. Each creaking, groaning revolution of the wheel producing seemingly unbearable agony. Other sufferers made up the roof slates with their oversized, painfully sensitized finger and toenails. They too dreaded the harrowing rains which stung with every drop, or the mill's thin walls with their painfully stretched skins, or its supporting beams with their protesting bones, or its creaking cogs and gears, every tooth of which hurt as though riddled with disease, every stressed and straining bone bar and shaft of which would have screamed if they possessed voices. Phyna, once Night Sister Phyna of the Order of Gehenna, now a condemned arch-heretic against all of the Huhsz, had for a long time been the focus of the mill's suffering. For over 100 years of crypt time, she had been crushed by the mill's grindstone millions and millions of times, her body crushed into a mush, still with full feeling and awareness with every rotation of the grindstone. After each day, her body would regrow and the process would start again. There was an extra element of pain of this mill, the knowledge of the thousands of people who bled to power it. But she had been trained in the punishments of this place, and could quickly fall into the Pranabindu trance of nothingness for a time. However, she would be quickly wrenched out of the trance by some extra surprise punishment, the grindstone turning into a molten metal or being flooded with acid. They only released her from the mill when she began to show no reaction at all. She had thought with the boredom for a while, but with her training, even that had passed. For a time after a number of other punishments, the rotting plagues, the hunters, the bugs, the indescribable pain, it all changed. She had woken, been told that she had been rescued from the crypt by the World Court's agents, that she was safe. She was kept in a safe house in Trons to stop Huhsz assassins from killing her or from taking her back. She received counselling. She walked through the rooftop gardens of the building, free from pain and from suffering. For over a year, she was free. Then they asked her for information. Why the Huhsz had picked her, one of their own, for special punishment. They asked her where it was. Where was the Pentrama? The final lazy gun. She'd laughed hysterically, knowing from the start that none of this was real. That the whole time this was still Gehenna, still the crypt. That this was a trick, a good one, but a trick. The fake world had collapsed like being suddenly awakened from a dream. As punishment for her insolence, she was raped then by hundreds of demons a day, their barbed sex organs spitting an acidic seed that melted through her. Yet she would still conceive with thousands of tiny, disgusting creatures that would burst out of her and chew their way through her body each day. One day she was moved again to one of these pockets of the crypt, like when they had told her she'd been rescued. This time, she was a baby, being raised up in a basket, up a cliff face to an ancient temple of Gehenna, perched on a rock. She had been given to the temple by her mother, the implanted memory seeding in itself told her, and now was to be an acolyte in the first years after the Dark War, nearly 10,000 years ago. She recalled being taken out of the basket by the temple's Night Mother, an old woman with kind eyes but a sharp demeanour. She was raised there, taught in the ways of the Lady Huhsz, of the Trinity of the Mother, Maiden and Crone, of the Crypt. At this point in the past they hadn't bred the phylactery organ into the population yet, so only through the prana bindu trance and the consumption of psychopsionic herbs and mushrooms within the temple's crystal lattice could the crypt's psionic waves be amplified enough. She had been tasked with the job of transcribing the holy books to make copies for distribution across Golta. She already knew the books off by heart, but these editions had been somewhat different from the modern texts. The Arcadian book, the Book of Light, had just been as wordy and technical. The Sheol book, the Book of Fate, was approachable and comforting. The Gehenna book, the Book of Sorrows, was her favourite. She had read it cover to cover until she could recite every word in her true childhood in the sacrosanctum of Lip City. So this transcription made her feel like the child her body here was demonstrating. At times she struggled in this fake youth. Despite her adult mind, she was dealing with child biology, her brain not fully developed. She found herself acting out just like a child sometimes. She could feel herself slipping into this fake world. In her late teens, she had kept herself insulated from the other young acolytes in the temple. she decided to dismiss the question of if they were fabrications of the crypt, or real souls in the same position as her. But without her training to hold on to her personhood, she would never get an answer. She was made a Sister of Gehenna, and her training continued. She relearned to use the power of voice, the audio neural control mechanism that enabled the manipulation of speech to allow complete control over a receiver. They had to practice on each other to build immunity to the art. She, of course, took to it like a duck to water, having already known how to use it. This had both impressed the Night Mother and made her suspicious of Phyna. One day, they had been summoned to the temple's courtyard. The Night Mother had told them that the temple had been selected to be on the route for this cycle's holy pilgrimage of the Golterian Pentrama. The term lazy gun wasn't invented yet by critics, the moniker coming from the idea that it was so lazy that instead of waging war, of researching other doomsday weapons, that with one press of an ancient weapon's trigger, that anything in its path would be destroyed. Set at the right scale, any of the 5 planets too could be destroyed. Even the star Goltaris, but that, some had speculated, had been the cause of the Dark War. She watched over the parapet of one of the temple's walls, down into the valley below as the holy peregrination approached from the distance. Thousands of cloaked and bejeweled figures dancing and singing, swirling in intricate patterns around the giant mirrored sphere, suspended in the air. They watched the slow approach for hours until the peregrination had arrived at the temple, stopping for the night. The only way to the temple on its rock monolith was by the basket system, normally used to take up food and supplies. The Pentrama, in its mirrored field, needed no such archaic system, simply rising up the rock face accompanied by the flying Holy Night Confessors. The giant glittering mirror sphere seemed to contract then, shrinking to a size around 3 meters in diameter and settling in the courtyard. All lay bowed in prayer, chanting the Har Kaladar and the sorrow poems. The Night Mother first walked into the sphere, walking through its mercury-like surface. It had been a few hours before it was Phyna's turn to see the weapon, deep, deep in the middle of the night. She stepped through the mirror field and was within a great dark space, much bigger than the sphere would have led one to believe. A great, dark and silent chamber. The Chamber of Fates, as it was known. At its core, she saw it, glowing against a dark background that was the chamber, with an anti-light radiant in its void glow. The Golterian Pentrama. Even knowing that this wasn't real, maybe very accurate, plucked directly from the crypt memory of the sisters who really lived in this cliff-top temple nearly 10 millennia ago, it made her feel both in awe and terrified to see the gun again. She'd always found it amusing that the lazy guns didn't even look like guns. It was an unconsolidated shape, often changing depending on its mood. Sometimes it was a cloud of dancing inverted light shards. At other times it took more solid shapes, like a complex hyperpentagon folding into an impossible space as it was now. To use the weapon, one would have to put one's hands into that multidimensional oddity, where the Pentrama would form around your hand and arm. From there, it was just a matter of focusing on an object, raising one's hand, wishing it gone. The destructive power was unparalleled by even antimatter. Testing of the weapon had shown it could be aimed at anything at any scale. Even individual atoms could be targeted and obliterated, or whole worlds. Phyna looked at the pentrama and felt a repressed memory begin to wash over her. Seeing this very weapon nearly 10,000 years from now, how she had helped to steal it, to hide it from the Huhsz, from anyone. How she had placed it, she severed the thought, obliterated the neuropathic connection it had crept along. All of this fake reality, the years in the temple were for this moment, an attempt to let her drop her guard. To think of what she had done so the Crypt could read it from her. The voice only had a limited control in this place, only over the Crypt body, not the mind. Only she could betray that secret, and she nearly did. She turned and ran from the chamber, the moonlight nearly blinding her with its comparative radiance. Shocked faces of the other sisters looked up at her, the Night Mother's kind eyes filled with concern. She turned and ran from the courtyard, the Night Mother quickly following behind her, shouting after her. She ran up the stairs to the exterior wall. Too high, she ran along it, looking for a place she could jump until she got to the break in the wall where the basket winch was housed. She skidded to a halt. "What are you doing, Phyna?" screamed the Night Mother's voice behind her, but her tone changed and filled with the Gehenna command. "Stop!" Phyna felt her muscles seize the voice. She fought it, slowly wresting control back from her locking limbs. She approached the edge of the sheer drop. Below, fires burnt as the gathered peregrination still danced. She pushed with all her willpower, moving, positioning herself to shift her center of gravity up as far as possible. "I said stop." She seized up again, but too late, too close to the edge. Her raised center of gravity and initial impetus was enough. Like a statue, she slowly toppled, the Night Mother's old hands only just missing the edge of her cloak as she tried to catch her. She fell, spinning and twisting towards the ground. She would miss this place. She didn't impact on the bedrock of the valley. She landed on a bed of rusty spiked metal, being ran through and sliding down multiple shards before sliding to a stop. Impaled, she stayed there for a month, unable to move, as night tigers weave their way through the maze of metal to devour her flesh, rending her apart before she could fully rot. But that was many lifetimes ago now, and Phyna stood on a rock outcropping, overlooking the mill that had been the focus of her torture for such a long time. She had been summoned again, her festering wounds all healed, her broken bones fixed, her diseases vanished. She even wore clothes, a black robe. Most sufferers were kept naked at all times. She waited for the arrival, keeping her eyes looking upwards towards the caustic clouds. They parted, twisting like a whirlwind, and the dark winged figure fell through the breach like a diving falcon. A great set of blackbird wings opened on the figure's back, and she glided around the hellscape, circling over like a carrion bird. Phyna knew that many sufferers would see this dark angel of hope and come running, hoping to be selected. Seeing Phyna, the figure descended, gliding down to her. Aliyah, Night Mother Superior of the Lip City Sacrosanctum, landed a few meters away from her, her great dark wings covered in black irised eyes retracting towards the figure before settling around her like a cloak. Her face and body covered in a woven veil made of shimmering black diamonds set in a fine filigree platinum webbing. "Phyna," said Night Mother Superior Aliyah. "Yes, Night Mother." spat Phyna through gritted teeth. She hated this part. Let us not waste each other's time. You have suffered enough, my dear. Just tell me where the pentrauma is, and you shall be released on the golden path. Last time I checked, Night Mother, I put the lazy gun right up your ass. Although I don't suppose you've seen that in a while, have you? The shimmering sword bathed in black fire appeared from nowhere in Aaliyah's hand. If I strike you down with this blade, Phyna, you will be released. Your torment will end right now. All you need to do is tell me where you put the pentrauma. Phyna stared at the blade, knowing that the Night Mother wasn't lying. The pentrauma cannot be left in the hands of those who do not understand it. The destruction it could reap, the damage it could do. Do you want another Dark War? Do you want Goltaris to be extinguished? The Decamillennium approaches. You know what the prophets say of the Elder Dark, the encroachment, the death of all. And you, Phyna, you are the one person who stands in the way of saving this universe. Phyna looked very sincerely at the Night Mother Superior. However, her face slowly began to creep into a smile. Her laughter burst out of her. Oh, Aaliyah, Aaliyah, Aaliyah. You forget one thing, my darling. I know the truth. I know what the fearsome engine is. I know what Serafa actually is. What Temple Prime is really for. And I know what you plan on doing with those pentrauma, Night Mother Superior. So, to answer your question, check your fucking asshole again. The Night Mother kept perfect composure, not even raising an eyebrow. She simply stood, watching her. Around the two women, sufferers began to approach. They had seen the descent of the Dark Angel and knew that their escape from the crypt was here. The Gehenna angels could remove any of the sufferers from this place, and Phyna watched as some gathered round, grovelling, crawling, dragging themselves closer and closer. Those that could scream or cry or beg did. Those that couldn't tried their best. You claim you know, Phyna, but you don't understand. You could never understand, my girl. More sufferers gathered around, until within a circle about them was a sea of pain, screams and squelches and cries. The Night Mother Superior looked about the wretched lot. Pick, Phyna. Choose one to be saved. No, I don't want to choose. Pick one to be saved. No, I... Pick one. Her voice rang like a bell throughout Phyna's soul. When she opened her eyes, she realized she was pointing to a tiny little figure near her feet. Decrepit, half-rotten, unrecognizable in sex or age. The Night Mother stepped forward, impaled the pathetic figure with her black fire blade. It screamed as it was engulfed in a dark fire, but turned to ash and disappeared in the crypt's winds. The other sufferers around her became agitated, some crying out in desperation, others in anger. Something is ending, and something is beginning. I feel it, Phyna. I know we need the pen trauma to survive. You think on that, and you know when the time is right, that you will do what you need to do. The Night Mother's dark wings spread in a flash. The gathering mob cowered in fear. She beat her wings and took back off into the skies, leaving Phyna there, alone. The mob staring at her unbroken form, her clothed body, her tender flesh, knowing that she had not picked them, knowing that she was different. Phyna looked about the lot of them. That anger, that desperation in their eyes. She knew what was about to happen.